Welcome back to the agenda. The Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, or PLAN as we all affectionately call it, was founded in 1994 to, and I quote from their website, bring together diverse and potentially competing organizations into one cohesive force for social and environmental justice in Nevada. That's a big one. The organization has grown by leaps and bounds over the years, due in part to the leadership of one of its founders, who is with us today. Bob Fulkerson is PLAN's executive director. He joins us now to tell us at which windmills he is lately tilting.
Thanks for coming back, Bob. I understand that you are down here for, among other things, of course, one of them being to visit your Southern Nevada office, of course, your very capable Southern Nevada office, but also to canvass in Congressional District 3, that's Joe Heck's Congressional District, on the immigration bill. I want to know what specifically you folks are telling voters in that district to tell Congressman Heck.
Well, 76% of the voters in Congressman Heck's district already have said that this broken immigration system has to be fixed this year, and that a pathway to citizenship is what's required. You know, and this idea that somehow you can throw out this piecemeal approach, this so-called KIDS Act that's a few crumbs for dreamers and deportation for parents and for other family members, that's not going to cut the mustard. So
you're encouraging them to encourage him to support a comprehensive approach as rather than a piecemeal approach.
Right, that a piecemeal approach, a little bit here, but leaving aside, you know, the 11 million people and their families that are already here, leaving them in legal limbo, subject to deportation, and knock on the door in the middle of the night, that's criminal, and that cannot happen.
Mr. Fulkerson, by my whip count in the House, I don't see much chance that your group or any other group in the country is going to be able to persuade enough Republicans to do an omnibus bill. I think piecemeal is the only way it's going to get done, and then those Republican congressmen will come back to their home states and say, okay, here's the list of what we did. We didn't do it all in one bill, but here's all the stuff we did. How are you going to convince voters that that's not adequate, assuming that the House does pass a series of bills that address all of the different pieces of reform?
Well, you know, I think the writing is on the wall, and it was since the last election. It's clear that there's no roadmap to the White House. There's no the political power of the Republican Party is in serious jeopardy if something meaningful does not happen. And that if they don't do something major, something comprehensive, something less than piecemeal, that their own party is, the future of their party is in jeopardy.
Elizabeth, I disagree with your whip count, actually, though, because I think if you take, yes, if you're looking for a majority of the majority party, a majority of Republicans, maybe you're onto something. But if you just took the Senate bill over to the House and let the majority of the House vote on it, I'm not so sure that it wouldn't pass. And I'm wondering if that's something that you're also telling folks as you canvass, that calling on Heck to ask his own party to let them have a vote instead of requiring this majority of a majority to go forward.
Absolutely. If the bill were brought up that the Senate passed in the House with all the Democrats voting for it and some swing Republicans that have already said they want to carry this through, it would pass. But the leadership has been intransigent in that, and that's one thing that we're going to knock on doors for today.
And so I'll go ahead with I'll go along with your premise and say, but I don't see any evidence that Boehner's going to agree to that. I don't see that happening. So let me ask you this. Let me go at this another way. You know, you guys don't like Joe Heck for any number of reasons, not just because of his position on immigration reform. Why not just, if you really believe that this is going to kill him at the ballot box, why not just let him stumble and fall? Just let him go ahead and do what he's doing. Don't try to influence him and vote him out of office.
Well, because the lives of many of my friends, the lives of people in this community, the lives of immigrants across the country are at stake, and that's too important to play those kind of political games with. We need his vote on this. We need him to stand for people in his district whose families, whose lives, whose futures are hanging in the balance on this.
Okay, we need to take a break, pay a couple bills. We will be back with Bob Fulkerson right after this. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the agenda. We're joined today by Bob Fulkerson of the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada. Bob, one of the things that a lot of the political industrial complex have been having fun with over the last, well, since the legislature was over, and even before really, was wondering if legislators would take a position on the teachers' initiative to raise taxes, to create a business tax. I, of course, have been saying that I hope they all come out against it, because then I think, even the Democrats, because then I think that'll make the electorates realize, yes, we've got to do it ourselves. But in watching Democrats refuse to take a position on this, what's your reaction?
Well, the reaction is one of disappointment. The reaction is, you know, we have a tax policy that's and tax policy making system that's in paralysis, which only serves the needs of the corporate elite, and that's who dictates tax policy in our state. And by Democrats, Republicans, everybody else remaining silent on this issue, they contribute to the dysfunction of our tax system.
Well, but wait a minute, Republicans aren't remaining silent on it. They're making this the centerpiece of their campaign in 2014. I mean, this is all Sandoval's going to be running on, because, you know, what else has he got? But, I mean,
right. Well, and that's why it's important for people who know how in trouble our state is, who are opposed to the $1 billion in cuts to K through 12, who looked at horror as one of the most educated minds in our state. Carol Lucy resigned because she didn't want to go through another legislative session with cuts. People who, who disagree with the bus therapy mental health system in our state, we could go on and on and on. People who disagree with that need to speak out and come up with a solution. So far, the only solution is the education initiative. And for people, and they need to take the Republicans on and say, okay, what is your solution? Is it more cuts? So we need more passion, we need more engagement on the part of our
You know, I have some sympathy for the Democrats in this state, especially those who live in sort of swing districts or districts that are slightly conservative, let's say, because I think in some ways, as I've said on the show many times, that this tax structure is a little bit flawed. There's a couple of places where you can, I think, legitimately criticize it in a nonpartisan way and just say, you know, this is a concern, or I wish this was a little different, I wish that had been written differently. So, you know, I sympathize with Democrats because really I think the teachers could have done a better job of coming up with a tax proposal that would have been more palatable, not only to independent voters, but to Democrats and conservative Democrats, so that they could jump on board and say, yeah, you know what, I do support this. I think the Democrats are afraid that if they support this unequivocally, some of those legitimate criticisms about the tax are going to get used against them at the polls, and they will.
Well, the polls, though, that the Retail Association of Nevada, PPP, show that this is wildly popular. I mean, this is, you know, people are against the fact that we're one of 3 states without some sort of corporate profits
tax. With all due
tax.
respect, the reason it's wildly popular is that the question is phrased in such a way as, you know, should we raise taxes on companies to have more money for education? In theory, most people do agree with that, but the campaign against this tax has not yet started, and so people haven't heard all of the arguments against it yet. So I'll be curious to see where those polls are next summer when we're in the middle of a very heated campaign over this.
And that's why we need Democrats to take a position against that, to challenge the people who are lying about this thing, about how bad it's going to be, to challenge that and put a stake through those lies.
Well, I don't think I'm lying about it when I say that I'm concerned, you know, that businesses who are taking a loss might still have to end up paying a tax. I'm concerned that we can't amend this thing for 3 years. If the voters pass it, because of the way the initiative process works, the legislature can't get in there after a year and say, oh boy, this piece wasn't a good idea. You know, let's get rid of that and make this thing work better. I think that's a valid concern.
If legislators in the business community wanted something that they could amend, or if they wanted something different, then they should have come forth with something instead of just digging their heels in and saying we're not going to do it, or saying nothing at all. And so this is what comes back to them. What about my theory that Democrats, if they actually come out against this thing, and I think some of them will, that actually helps the prospects of this thing passing at the polls?
I think that's an entertaining theory, and I enjoy it. But it scares me. It scares me because people are looking to leaders for ideas. They're looking, people who are on the fence, they look to leaders. They look at, popular Democratic and Republican leaders for ideas on things that they're ambivalent or not very educated about. And so when our friends in the Democratic Party remain silent on this or oppose, it hurts the prospects.
All right, well, so far we've got Atkinson, Pierce, and Tick Segerblum have come out in favor. And then according to our colleague John Ralston on his show, Mo Dennis said he supported it, but he waffled recently on a panel So I think Dennis...
Are you sure he didn't say he supported discussing it?
I think he did say pretty much that. We're out of time, unfortunately, so a couple topics we were not able to get to.
Well, we'll get him next time. Bob, thanks so much for coming in. Always a pleasure when you're down. All right, when we come back, Nevada's Republican Party gets some national recognition. No, not in a nice way. It's right after this.